In today's video, we're going to look at a retirement case study for Jim and Maria. They're 60 years old. They've saved $1,250,000 for retirement, and their main concern is being able to have the income that they want and affording health insurance. Now that they're no longer working, they've looked at COBRA plans, they looked at other health insurance options, and it's the number one sticking point for them to decide whether or not they can realistically retire now or whether they'll have to wait until age 65. So without any further ado, let's jump right into this video. For most people trying to retire before age 65, the number one concern that comes up is how can they affordably pay for health insurance? It's a sticker shock, frankly, for most people going from working for a company plan to all of a sudden having to pay for things on their own. And so the first step to decide whether or not you can afford health insurance is to look at what are the income thresholds that you have to qualify for in order to get discounts on your health insurance. Now, these can be pretty substantial. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at doing a health insurance analysis to figure out how to qualify for health insurance, what are those income targets they'll have to look at, and then to look at their retirement income plan, managing their portfolio. And like I said, Jim and Maria have saved $1,250,000, and most of that is in an IRA, and a portion of that is in their Roth IRA. So we're going to look at how can they manage kind of the distribution from those accounts in order to simultaneously kind of take care of this puzzle that people have of, okay, I want to have a certain amount of income, but if I have too much income, I can't afford health insurance. So kind of what's the sweet spot or maybe strategies we can look at in order to solve this puzzle. Of course, we're going to incorporate their Social Security benefits into this plan as well. So first thing I'm going to show on the screen here is a chart, a nice little reference PDF. And if you'd like a copy of this PDF, just go ahead and leave a comment, and I'll be happy to send this out to you. But what this is showing are the income thresholds to qualify for subsidies under the Affordable Care Act. Now, very important, with the recent changes under the Big Beautiful Bill, that's what it's called? That's right. There's some changes for this upcoming year. So it used to be that you could have, for the past, 4 years, you could have relatively higher income levels and still get a discount on your health insurance. Well, that's changed now. We're going back to the way that the law was written pre-2021. And the way that it works is that if your income is above 400% of the federal poverty line, you will not qualify for any discount. If you're below 400% of the federal poverty line, then you will qualify for a discount. So how much is a federal poverty line for a household of two, Jim and Maria? So it's based on the number of people in your household. So for them, we look at the second column here. I'm going to just zoom in here on this chart. Okay, so they're a household of two, and the federal poverty line for them is $20,440 per year. Well, they can have 4 times that number. So we go all the way over here to the right. And what it says here is they could have $81,760 of modified adjusted gross income and still get a discount on their health insurance. So it's really important to note here, there's a lot of confusion with this whole idea of modified adjusted gross income versus your tax brackets. Your modified adjusted gross income, basically, this is your total income after you account for things like IRA contributions or HSA contributions, but it does not take into account any itemized deductions or your standard deduction. So for married filing jointly right now, I think the standard deduction in 2025 is $31,500. And so that's quite a large deduction. So we actually have to look at the income before that level, before they hit that threshold to determine whether they qualify for health insurance. So that's the income target we have to look at. Now, in their situation, they want to have at least $6,500 per month of income. And with that income target, that puts them basically right on the line to be able to qualify. So with their overall portfolio, they have $1 million in IRA and $250,000 in their Roth IRA. So is there anything that we could do, basically get the cash flow that they want and lower their modified adjusted gross income to get more affordable health insurance? So what I did is I started playing with some numbers. The first thing I did is looked at what if $2,000 a month of their income came from their Roth IRA. And they did that between now and they retire at age 60 all the way until age 65. What would that do for their overall health insurance calculation? So I want to do something kind of fun here. I'm actually going to pull up the health insurance website and let's plug in numbers for Jim and Maria. So what I did is I started with their target income for the year, which was $81,000, which would put them right on the threshold. And I always like to leave a little bit of wiggle room because now the way the law works is if you go over even just $5, you go from getting a pretty significant subsidy to nothing. What if they had $2,000 a month, so $24,000 a year coming out of that, coming from their Roth IRA, tax-free, that does not show up in their MAGI? How would that impact things? So what that does is that lowers their projected income for the year from $81,000 of modified adjusted gross income down to $57,000. So let's look at some health insurance estimates based on that number. Okay, so we're on healthcare.gov, and I'm going to actually walk you through how this works. So if you come to healthcare.gov/cplans/hashtag/household, they've got this really cool tool. Now, based on the state that you live in, you might have your own state website that you have to look at. Jim and Maria, they actually live in Florida. So for them, we're going to use the federal website. All right, so we'll go through the screen. So first, we have to go through how many people are in your household because the subsidy is based off of that. So you and other people, go ahead and continue. Are you married? Yes. Continue. Are you claiming independence? Now for them, no, it's not the case. But if you had children that were on your health insurance plan that are below the age of 26 because they're still in college or something like that, you could absolutely include those in. And that would actually allow you to have a higher income and still qualify for subsidies, which is pretty cool. So for them, no, they don't have any dependents. Now let's go through this. So they're Jim, 60 years old. None of these apply to him, not on Medicare, Medicaid. He's not a legal parent or guardian of a child under 19, not pregnant, not a tobacco user. Maria, she's also 60 years old. And again, none of these apply to her, so we'll hit continue. Now, hit confirm. We're going to put in their estimated income for the year. Now, like I said, to hit their target $6,500 a month net, what that amounts to is they have to pull money out of their IRA. So we have to account for taxes there because we're looking for a net income of $6,500 a month. And so when we factor that in, then and then we subtract out the $2,000 a month for their Roth IRA amounts, that brings them to $57,000 modified adjusted gross income for the year. So really their entire plan is hinging on whether or not they can afford health insurance. So with an MAGI of $57,000, they would qualify for a monthly subsidy that they can use towards a health insurance plan on the marketplace of $1,978 a month, which amounts to just shy of $24,000 a year, $23,736, which is actually kind of cool. I didn't plan this from the beginning, but it's almost the exact dollar amount they're pulling from out of their Roth IRA. So they're pulling out tax-free money from their Roth, and they're essentially getting an extra $24,000 a year of credit or income that they can use towards health insurance. So now let's look at what would health insurance plan look like for their area. Now they live in the Orlando area of Florida, and so let's look at some health insurance plans. So here first on the screen, we're looking at some high deductible plans. So this AM Better Health Elite Bronze plan, I'll kind of zoom in here. You can see that this plan used to cost $1,947 a month for both of them, but with the credit, that covers the entire cost. So actually, they would pay $0 a month for their health insurance. Now, this is a very high deductible plan, which may not actually make sense for your particular situation. But, basically the way that the credit works is regardless of the plan you choose, you get that credit. So you can choose a more kind of robust plan, a more expensive plan with a lower deductible. And so we're scrolling down here. These are all kind of high deductible plans. So let's kind of go up to maybe some, different plans here. So for example, this plan here has zero deductible and it costs $251 a month. So this plan normally costs $2,229 a month, but with the subsidy, it only costs $251 a month. So now they're going from a situation where in order to retire and have health insurance for just a basic plan, they were looking at around $2,000 a month. But with this subsidy, because we are being kind of surgical about where we pull money from their retirement accounts, they can hit their income threshold that they want to have their lifestyle, but they can also do so affordably because now they can pay for a health insurance plan that's not going to cost them so much. Now we're looking at a plan overview for Jim and Maria. So like I said, they have $1.25 million here and their target monthly budget is $6,500 a month. Now, actually, they were planning on having to pay a higher amount for health insurance. So this is going to give them quite a bit of wiggle room and just kind of their lifestyle spending, but that's great. It's going to leave them extra money to do travel and whatever else they want to do. And then of course, even though they have a low monthly premium, they should probably still set aside some money for, out-of-pocket expenses that come up, etc., throughout the year. And so that money will probably still get used, but it does give them kind of higher wiggle room within their plan based on what they were initially looking at. So what I want to look at now are other tax strategies for Jim and Maria to have an overall better retirement. So we're going to come over to this tax planning module. and we are going to look at what they should consider. So when it comes to tax planning and retirement, one of the things that you'll hear a lot about is the idea of doing Roth conversions, which is basically taking money proactively out of your IRA, and then instead of just taking it out and spending it or putting it like in your bank account, you're taking it from your IRA, pay taxes on it, and then you shift it over to your Roth. Now, the reason why you do this is hopefully you can, when you take the money out, you're going to pay a lower rate so that in the future, as that money goes tax-free, you can access it in the future at hopefully, when your tax rates would have been higher for a couple of, for many different reasons, you can pull that money out tax-free. And so overall, it's going to reduce, the tax burden on your retirement plan. So on the screen in front of us, we're looking at different distribution strategies over here on the left. And across the top here, we can see your average tax rate, your total taxes paid in retirement, your total net income, and your total net legacy. So this is the value of your portfolio at the end of your life after taxes have been paid. What would that dollar amount be? And we're trying to optimize really here for total income and for the the least amount of taxes being paid. So you can see here on the screen, the strategy that's highlighted, and it actually happens to be the one we're going to choose, is optimizing for Roth converting up to the 12% bracket. And you can see that compared with some of these other strategies, like just taking money out pro rata or pulling out of their IRA and then their Roth IRA, this is going to save them, go from something like paying 10% on average, getting down into the 6% per year. You'll see that actually this Roth converting up to the first Medicare IRMA bracket is actually a slightly lower tax rate, but this 12% one results in a pretty significantly higher net legacy, about an extra $200,000. And I think that's why this one is being highlighted in the software. Now we have a little bit of an issue here because, okay, yes, doing Roth conversions up to the 12% bracket would save them quite a bit in taxes, about $600,000 over their lifetime. And that $600,000 less that you're paying in taxes is just extra money you have for whatever else, that is important to you. But one of the issues here with that, with just doing Roth conversions right off the bat is health insurance. In the beginning of their retirement, if they want the income level they want and they were just going to Roth convert up to the 12% bracket, that would actually put them above the 400% federal poverty line, because the 400% poverty line does not take into consideration their standard deduction, and the 12% bracket does. So there's about a $31,000 difference between those two numbers. So if we just kind of carelessly started converting up to the 12% bracket early in retirement, it would blow everything up, and now all of a sudden they have to pay an extra $2,000 a month for their health insurance. That's not going to work. So what I actually did here in this plan is I said, okay, between the time they retire at age 60 until they reach age 65, they're not going to do any Roth conversions. We're going to kind of force the plan. We're going to take out some of their income, monthly income from the Roth IRA at a rate of $2,000 a month. And then once they hit 65, well, now they qualify for Medicare. And there are much higher income thresholds for Medicare before you start having to pay extra for your Medicare benefits. And so really what this gives us the chance to do is we're going to spend down a little bit in their Roth IRA early on. Once they're on to Medicare, we can now begin doing Roth conversions to replenish what they took out of their Roth IRA and build it up even greater into the future. And looking at the numbers, really this is going to save them over $600,000 projected in taxes over their life of their retirement. So it's a really, really important strategy to look at when it comes to your retirement. I mean, I would say that most of the people that I talk to, their number one concern is how the heck am I going to pay for health insurance? So if we can prioritize this planning need and really optimize for it, it really unlocks the ability to retire a lot sooner than you thought might have been possible beforehand. So I want to go over a little bit more of their retirement plan. We're going to look at kind of the distribution strategy here. So coming back to the main screen, let's look at their cash flows over time. Now, I didn't go over it in a ton of detail for this scenario, but basically what we're going to do is early in their retirement, you can see all of their money highlighted here in yellow is coming out of the portfolio. Now, once we get to 62, actually, I'm having Maria claim her Social Security benefit. This is going to reduce the amount of money that we have to pull from the portfolio. And overall, it's going to help optimize the plan. So her normal Social Security benefit was $3,000 a month, but because she's claiming it early, she's only going to get about $2,200 a month. Now, the powerful thing about that is because of that, we go from having to pull out about $6,500 a month from the portfolio. Once she claims Social Security, now we only have to pull out about $4,800 a month. Now, as we go on, you can see that once we get here to age 65, you can see this yellow line jumps up, and that's because now they are doing Roth conversions. So there's more money kind of technically coming out of the portfolio, although in reality, there's more coming out, but a lot of it's just going right back in for Roth conversions. It's going right back into the overall household. So as we go along, now once we get to age 67, For this scenario, I have Jim claiming his benefit then. Now, this plan could have worked with some other Social Security strategies. We could have had Jim delay until age 70, but for these clients, they have more confidence in their portfolio being able to grow over time. So they wanted to choose a claiming strategy that they're basically betting on their portfolio doing better than just kind of the projections we're using. Obviously, that's never guaranteed, but that's kind of what they're optimistically hoping for. And so for them, they felt better taking their Social Security, at age 62 and 67, as opposed to waiting all the way until age 70. So with this being said, you can see that now, once Jim claims Social Security, the amount they have to take from their portfolio drops off significantly. Now they're only having to take out about $2,000 a month. With Jim's benefit now, his regular Social Security benefit was $3,600 a month. But because of cost of living adjustments between age 60 and 67, by the time he claims, it's going to be something more like $4,200 a month. Now, looking at this, you can see that this yellow line kind of tapers off. And eventually, they're not even taking any money out of the portfolio because their entire income need is being totally taken care of by Social Security. So you might ask, okay, does this mean they've run out of money? What's going on here? Let's flip over to another screen, because in reality, they're going to end up with a much larger legacy than you might have expected. So what this screen is showing is stress testing their retirement plan. We're running it through a bunch of scenarios, looking at the stock market and the bond market going all the way back to 1870 actually, and scrambling all those years and running their plan with their portfolio and with their Social Security through that to see, based on different types of market conditions, what is it likely that they'll have, after being retired for like 35 years. They could obviously live longer than that or shorter than that, but this gives us a good stress test to see how strong the plan is. So you could tell, from the other, or I should say on that other screen, you saw the chart that eventually they stopped taking money out of their portfolio, but it's not because they ran out. And in fact, what happened is because of their proactive Roth conversions from age 65 and onward, maxing out the 12% tax bracket, eventually they get to the point where most of their money is sitting in a Roth IRA where they don't have to take required minimum distributions, and they actually can take money out of that whenever they want, completely tax-free. So if they have like long-term care needs, they need to go into like an assisted living facility or something like that, or, they just want to do extra things or whatever they want to do, they can just at their own discretion take money out of that account, to improve their life. So this screen shows us kind of a distribution of like, what if the markets are horrible? What if they're really good? What if they're kind of average? And what would that look like from an overall legacy perspective? So this table down here shows us, we're going to look at the median result. And based on this plan, having the income they want, they're looking at dying with a portfolio of about $5 million, which is pretty incredible when you consider that they're starting with 1.2 million. And they're actually starting out with a pretty, with kind of a pretty high distribution rate, and they're still resulting with, with this amount of money. This was pretty powerful. A lot of people don't realize when it comes to planning for retirement is that even if you're starting with a higher distribution rate, because Social Security will kick in eventually, it reduces the amount you have to take from your portfolio. And so just like when you were working over your career and your portfolio started with, nothing at one point when you started working, and now you're retired and you've got like $1 million or whatever you have saved up, we're looking at kind of another 35-year period of time. And that's how these numbers can grow so large, of just compound interest over time. And we're not using crazy rates of return here. In fact, in the software here, I have their portfolio set up at about 5% above inflation. So if we look at that, it's like maybe, 7.5% if we just use like a 2.5% inflation rate. Now, is that exactly what's going to be? I have no idea, right? I don't have a clue, but that's kind of what things have been like on average. And so we use those historical numbers as a basis to kind of look into the future and maybe hopefully we're anchored to something that will approximate reality. So anyway, now that we've looked at Jim and Maria's scenario, and you can see how realistic it is with some careful planning to be able to retire before age 65 and qualify for affordable health insurance, you're more empowered to understand how some of these rules work and how you might apply them to your own situation. If you'd like some help running through your own retirement situation, to look at your specific numbers, your income needs, and your overall portfolio, feel free to click the link in the description. I'd be happy to sit down with you for a one-on-one call to give you some direction on how you can maximize your retirement. So until the next time, I hope you have a great week, and I'll catch you in the next video.